Hello, parents and professionals in our membership area. This is a video just for you. It won't be available to anybody else. This is an exclusive. I'm going to talk to you today about how your style of parenting or teaching, if that may be the case, has been influenced by the people that taught and parented you. And the reason why this is such an important thing for you to know about is because some of those styles that you adopted don't really represent who you are or how you want to be. And so I'm going to be asking you to do a bit of an audit on your own experiences, your own history, and notice where you can see some parallels. Notice where you can see some...
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, that's fine because I wasn't talking to you anyway. Notice where you can see some crossover between the experiences that you have had and the experiences that you are now creating for others. Now, would it be true to say that some parents and teachers are so very conscious of the experiences that they had that they make a real effort to do and provide or create an environment which is the absolute opposite? 100% that's true. And I would hazard a guess that that is most true when the way that you were taught or parented was undesirable. So now you are very conscious of doing the opposite. Now that can be favourable, and it's still something worth evaluating because sometimes people go too far the other way. You know, it's like the pendulum swings from one extreme to the other. For example, if you had a teacher who was really aggressive, almost a bully in how they interacted with the class, they made people feel humiliated. They made people feel embarrassed. Maybe they were even, if we go back far enough, maybe they were even physically aggressive. So it could have really influenced your teaching style to be one where you are a really good listener, where you are very gentle, where you are very considerate. Which all, on the face of it, swinging the pendulum in the opposite direction sounds amazing. And it might also mean that you sometimes get taken advantage of. Not necessarily by your pupils, your students, but maybe by your colleagues, maybe by other people in your life that relate to your teaching life. So it's still worth doing the audit, even if you feel that you have already been very conscious of the influences that you have experienced yourself, and you have already made good efforts to do things in a different way. You still need to do the audit because you doing things in a different way may also be too extreme, and it's worth thinking about, okay, where is my seesaw balancing right now? Am I too far up one end or the other? What's the sort of perfect pitch for this? The other reason why doing the audit is so important is because most of the time we are not terribly conscious of the things that we do, say, and how we react and how we behave. And those are the ones where the programming we received really leaks out unnoticed. If you have realized that sometimes your home is chaotic, it may have something to do with chaoses that you experienced yourself as a child. If you've noticed that you get stressed out in particular situations, you are probably recreating the stresses of one of your own parents. And you don't need to do this stuff. In fact, I'll give you a good analogy for this. I may have shared this before, but I think this is just such a nice metaphor. And it's probably true somewhere in the world. So there was a daughter who had her mum over for dinner, and she was preparing a big piece of pork for the Sunday roast. And she said to her mum, "Before I roast the pork, I need to cut the end off of it. Need to slice a chunk off of the end. And the mum said, that's correct. And the daughter said, but why? Like, why do I learnt that from you. Why do I do that? And the mum said, well, that's the way that grandma taught me. So the daughter's learnt it from the mum, and the mum's learnt it from the grandma. So then she says, well, why did grandma do it? And the mum says, don't know, I suppose that's the way that her mum taught her. So they go to the grandma and they say, when you cook the pork, you always cut the end off before you roast it. Why is that? And the grandma said, well, that's the way great grandma taught me to do it. You always cut the end off the pork before you roast it in the oven. So they go to the great grandma and they say, great grandma, I cut the end off the pork before I roast it. Mum cuts the end off the pork before she roasts it. Nan cuts the end off the pork before she roasts it. Why do we do this? Like, where did this tradition come from? And the great grandma says, I always used to cut the end off of the piece of pork before I roasted it because it was too big for my dish. So sometimes there are things that once had a function that get passed down through our heritage, through our genealogy, and in all sorts of other environmental ways as well. And once upon a time, those things served a purpose, but they do not serve a purpose anymore. And even if they do, that's not to say that there isn't a better way of handling things. You know, you have your own mind and you have your own circumstances to work around. So there may be better ways to deal with some of these challenging situations that show up in the home or show up in the classroom. You don't need to necessarily do what you were taught or were programmed to do. You can independently think of a better way. So my challenge to you is to think about what are those things that cause the chaos, cause the voices to raise, cause the emotions to go in a bad direction. What are the things that cause the switching off, the stonewalling, the not listening? Is there a different way that I can handle that situation that would maybe bring about a completely different result? Maybe it would give me a sense of better control. Maybe it would simmer down unwanted, bubbling, negative emotions way more quickly than that old strategy that I used to have that I picked up from goodness only knows where. There probably is an alternative. Now, that's not to say that every time you do something in a new way, that you're going to be on the money and hit the right strategy first time around. You probably won't. Let's be realistic. You know, when you decide, right, next time he gets feisty with me like that, I'm going to ignore it rather than trying to calm him down or appease him in some way. I'm going to flatly ignore it. The first time you do that, it's probably going to feel a little bit uncomfortable and you're going to get some resistance to your new reaction, which may tell you that you need to just like lean into it and do it a bit more, but it may also be a sign that that was not the right way to handle the situation, in which case you have to try something else. You don't always get the right solution the first time around. You have to keep being creative and trying out new and different ways of doing things. But there's always going to be new and different ways of doing things, right? So if you can make things work easier, faster, with less toxic energy involved, then it's always a good idea to audit those things and come up with some better situations and solutions for them. So that is my tasking for you. Let's have a think about the things that you do, especially when situations are negative and unwanted. What are the things that you do that were never your reactions and were never your behaviors in the first place, that you have adopted from those that influenced you? Is it time to set those aside and come up with some new ways for the future? I will let you ponder that question. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I'll see you next time around. Bye.